Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Attorneys for the Lethbridge couple facing charges in connection with their baby daughter being assaulted were in Lethbridge court today. BCN's Angela Stewart has the latest. The federal Conservatives are claiming victory after the Trudeau Liberals suspend the amendment to their gun ban bill. And the Canadian Taxpayers Federation raised a red flag as to how many Canadian jobs could be impacted with the Trudeau government's Just Transition plan.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A couple accused in the assault of their 6-week-old baby girl were scheduled for a bail hearing earlier today. The couple are being charged independently and are not co-accused. Angela Stewart joins us outside of the Lethbridge Provincial Courthouse and has been covering the case. Angela, what's the latest?
Well, Hal, Friday's bail hearing was very brief for both accused in this case. The father, who cannot be named under a publication ban to protect the victim's identity, did not appear via CCTV footage. His appearance was waived by defense counsel. During a previous hearing last week, the court heard the father was still looking to obtain a lawyer, and he had been approved for legal aid. He now has legal representation. Defense John Oman appeared on behalf of the mother accused. She did not appear Friday morning, and her matter was put over to next week. The mother can also not be named under a publication ban. The couple are not co-accused and are being charged separately. The 52-year-old father faces charges of aggravated assault, sexual interference, and failing to provide the necessaries of life. The 31-year-old mother has been charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. On January 18th, police were called to a Northside home after receiving a welfare tip from the public that a 6-week-old baby girl was being abused. The baby was found to be in medical distress at the time when officers arrived. An investigation determined that she had been assaulted multiple times over a 6-week period. The infant does remain in critical condition at the Alberta Children's Hospital in Calgary. Well, both parents remain in custody at the Lethbridge Correctional Centre. The father's matter will be back in court on February 24th, while the mother's case will be back in court on February 10th. Hal?
Thanks so much, Angela. Self-proclaimed freedom fighter Arthur Pawlowski was back in the Lethbridge courthouse earlier today. Pawlowski is being charged with inciting mischief, counselling interference with critical infrastructure, and failing to keep the peace when he spoke at the Coutts border blockade last winter. He's pleaded not guilty to these charges. Stephen Johnston, the Crown prosecutor, cited a video of Pawlowski at the Smuggler's Saloon in Coutts, saying he went to the small border village and lit a match for supporters of the blockade. It was decided that on February 17th, they would make a final date for the verdict on Pawlowski's case. Pawlowski was not a happy camper outside of the courthouse.
Well, again, it's prolonging. It's like never-ending story. Another week, another month, another year. Like I'm 3 years now. As you remember, I was the first Canadian to receive the COVID ticket. That was 3 years ago. I am enduring a non-stop harassment, intimidation, and attack by tyrannical government for 3 years now. This trial should never happen. That's the first thing. Like here, Arthur Pawlowski, the pastor, is not on trial. Canada is on trial. Freedom of expression is on trial. Freedom of religion is on trial. You are on trial because if I'm convicted, if this Crown prosecutor will have his way, that means you're next.
Pawlowski also said he felt disrespected by the Crown prosecutor who kept mispronouncing his last name, calling him Pawlowski instead of Pawlowski. The two had a heated exchange before the second half of the trial earlier today. The Alberta government will now require post-secondary institutions to provide annual free speech reporting to the Minister of Advanced Education. Minister Dimitrios Nicolaides says more needs to be done to ensure our institutions are adequately protecting free speech. In a release, Nicolaides says he will continue to explore greater steps we can take to strengthen free speech on campus. The announcement follows an incident at the University of Lethbridge in which 700 protesters prevented controversial speaker Frances Widdowson from presenting her speech called How Wokeism Threatens Academic Freedom. A total of 1 in 3 people in our province do not have access to a family doctor. That's according to Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips. Phillips was at the Galt Museum earlier today discussing the doctor shortage here in our city. She outlined ways that we as a city can attract and retain family physicians.
Ensuring that We have a competent government at the helm that respects public health care is, I think, the first step there. The second step is, of course, to ensure that we have the right compensation framework, not just for physicians, but for other primary health care providers. And third, we need to make sure that we have the physical infrastructure in place, whether that is new clinics, new primary health care clinics, where we have the right care team model in place as well, because it's not just about family physicians. It's about that whole continuum of care for people.
The UCP announced that 17 new doctors have committed to Lethbridge this year, and some are already practicing medicine here in our city. Well, as much of central Canada has been dealing with much of a deep freeze, it's been a different story here in southwestern Alberta with those warm Chinook winds. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it looks like a decent weekend shaping up for Lethbridge.
Yeah, it sure will, Hell. And we saw lovely weather again today, as well as we reached a high of 9 degrees. Now, this evening and into Saturday, we're going to be seeing that westerly Chinook wind gusting up to 80 kilometers per hour. So hopefully your house still has the shingles on the roof by the end of the weekend. We are looking at an overnight low of 1 degree and a high of 7 degrees on Saturday, with a mix of sun and cloud, clearing up more in the afternoon. And after that, it's going to get even warmer. We could even see some double digits next week, Hal. I'll be back later in the newscast to let you know all those details.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is claiming victory after an amendment to the federal government's gun ban bill was paused. The amendment had introduced a controversial new definition of an assault-style weapon, which added dozens of semi-automatic rifles used by hunters, farmers, and ranchers. Poilievre says the Tories forced Trudeau into what he calls the humiliating climb down. The amendment caused an outcry in many parts of Canada as hunters argued it criminalized weapons they often use legally for hunting. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also suggested that life has become so miserable under the Liberals that some people want to end their lives, something he says the government is prepared to help them do under the medical assistance in dying regime. Mental Health Minister Carolyn Bennett says Poilievre is misrepresenting the government's planned legislation.
After 8 years of growing poverty and desperation, more and more Canadians are suffering with depression. Some of them are going to food banks asking for help ending their lives, not because they're sick, but because life has become so miserable and they want to end their lives altogether. This government has suggested veterans should end their lives instead of getting help that they need. And now they've announced that a year from today, they will introduce measures to end the lives of people who are depressed. Will they recognize that we need to treat depression and give people hope for a better life rather than ending their lives?
I think it is totally irresponsible for the Leader of the Opposition to misrepresent what this means. On this side, and with the support of the expert panel and so many Canadians, we'll continue to develop and provide the kind of mental health supports that are necessary for people who are depressed.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says all Canadians should be able to afford a place to live. He says the Trudeau Liberals need to do more as rents across the country have jumped dramatically. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his government has rolled out several programs, but agreed that more work needs to be done to help Canadians.
Everyone in this country should be able to find a home that meets their family's needs, and it's in their budget. Sadly, that's not the case. People are struggling to find a home that they can afford. And the rent under this Prime Minister, since he's taken office, has gone up by 60%. It's a massive increase. And people are struggling. The Prime Minister hasn't built the homes he promised he would build, nor has he tackled speculation that's driving up the cost of housing. Why has the housing crisis gotten worse, not better, under this Prime Minister?
We know that housing affordability is a real concern, and we continue to be committed to tackling it. It's why we've introduced the first-time homebuyer incentive, why we committed over $82 billion to the National Housing Strategy and supported the creation and repair of almost 500,000 homes. We announced a rent-to-home program. We've helped more than 2.6 million families get the housing they need, and we're working to ensure that every Canadian has an affordable place to call home.
Now, do you remember when we told you that the Trudeau government would be receiving the report from Justice Rouleau on the public inquiry into the Emergencies Act 2 weeks before anyone else? Well, it appears as though that may not be the case anymore. To talk about this in more detail is lawyer Eva Chipiuk, who is representing a number of Ottawa protesters who were at the Freedom Convoy last winter, and she joins us now from Edmonton. Eva, now it appears as though our Prime Minister may be receiving Justice Rouleau's report at the same time as Parliament and the public. When will that be?
We haven't heard directly from the Commission itself. Parties haven't been notified about this, but what was at least advertised in mainstream media was that an extension was granted by a government source, and that the deadline of February 20th to table the whole report to the House of Commons and Senate is still going forward. But you raise also an interesting point, because I actually just assumed, and the lawyers I'm working with assumed the public would be getting it at the same time as the House. But some people have raised that concern because it does just say it's going to be tabled.
So what really happened? Was there pressure put on the Trudeau Liberals to become a little more transparent?
Well, I would hope so, because as we've talked, many times, the Emergencies Act is not just any regular act. It has inside of it this mechanism for an inquiry, because it's such a drastic and extraordinary tool the government can use. So it should be incredibly transparent, all of this. So I do hope that it was in an effort to be transparent. It shouldn't have happened at all, in my opinion. The Cabinet or anyone else should be getting a secret copy of the report in advance.
Eva, what are you anticipating to find in Justice Rouleau's report?
One thing that I would love for your viewers to know, and I've been trying to make this really known to the Canadian public, is that the Cabinet and Prime Minister Trudeau relied on a legal opinion to invoke the Emergencies Act. And they provided us that legal opinion that was 10 pages, but every single page was completely blanked out. So my question to Canadians is that enough? Is that transparent? Do Canadians deserve to see that legal opinion so that it can inform Commissioner Rouleau, it can inform Canadians on what it was that the federal government used in order to invoke the Emergencies Act? In my opinion, all of this should have been on the table a long time ago.
Thanks so much, Eva. That was Eva Chipiak, Edmonton lawyer who's representing a number of Ottawa protesters who participated in the Freedom Convoy last winter. A number of Albertans are not happy with the Trudeau Liberals' Just Transition Plan, as in just transition out of the oil and gas sector. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation says many Canadians would lose their jobs as a result. Chris Sims is Alberta Director with the CTF, and she joins us now from Lethbridge to talk more about this in detail. Chris, you say the Liberals' Just Transition Plan would apparently affect more than just our energy sector?
Yes, it definitely would. As you know, we have more than 140,000 people just here in Alberta working in energy. But if you look a bit more closely at these details in this memo that we found in Ottawa, it is about 40,000 people or so here in Alberta in farming, and about 40,000 people or so here in Alberta in trucking, and lots more folks in construction and manufacturing. And so if you think about it, these are the folks who, heat our homes, build our homes, grow our food, keep us warm, and deliver everything we eat and use. It's a very, very problematic.
Now, Chris, let's talk about the salaries associated with the potential 2.7 million jobs affected by the Just Transition Plan. Stats Canada says that would affect around $219 billion per year?
Yes, and that's why we had to ask several times, is this right? Is this accurate? So again, this is an 80-something page memo that was sent between the bureaucrats at the Department of Natural Resources up to their minister. And what it was, okay, what sort of labor impact would Just Transition have on Canadian workers? The bureaucrats then listed all of the jobs potentially affected by this. Potentially is the key word here, and they're trying to wriggle out of it. But if you add up all of those jobs, the 2.7 million workers, the salaries are $219 billion per year. Hal, we can't afford to lose a fraction of these jobs.
Thanks so much, Chris. That was Chris Sims, Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, joining us here in Lethbridge. The war in Ukraine has cost thousands of lives. It has now been a year since Russia invaded Ukraine. A number of countries are continuing to help Ukraine's President Zelensky in his battle with Russia's Putin. You can include Canada. Yves Engler is a peace activist and a blogger from Montreal. He says the war in Ukraine has also impacted Canada in a big way financially.
From the standpoint of resources, Canada has now spent about $5 billion in assistance to the Ukraine, both military assistance, toward about $1.5 billion in military assistance and $3 billion or so in different kind of financial assistance to the Ukrainian government, which would have collapsed financially without the outside support. So that is starting to, cost the Canadian taxpayer a certain amount of resources, and the U.S. is even, it's about $100 billion contribution from the U.S.
Peace activist Yves Engler will have more on the war in Ukraine coming up in the second half of our newscast. Well, it was nice being above our average temperature high for this time of year, which is 0, and the milder temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta will be sticking around. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. The Chinook winds brought warmer temperatures here to Lethbridge, and it appears as though the milder temps may be sticking around for a little while. Jeanette Rocher is in on with all of the weather details. Jeanette, now before we talk about the nice weekend shaping up, Thursday was Groundhog Day, and I have to ask, did the groundhog see a shadow? Will we be seeing 6 more weeks of winter in our region?
Well, in our region, no, Hal, but there seems to be a difference of opinion among the groundhogs. So here in Alberta, our Balzac Billy of Balzac, Alberta, predicted an early spring, but there's a groundhog in Nova Scotia that said 6 more weeks of winter. There was one in Ontario that said an early spring. And then, of course, the most famous groundhog of all, which is Punxsutawney Phil in Pennsylvania, he said 6 more weeks of winter. So it seems to be the battle of the groundhogs. But regardless, it looks like spring is here for us. Look at these temperatures. We're looking at high of Saturday, 7 degrees, 9 degrees on Sunday, high of 9 again on Monday. There we go. We could see double digits coming at us on Tuesday with lots of sunshine and 10 degrees, down to 3 degrees on Wednesday and 4 degrees for next Thursday. So I would say spring is here. So maybe our Balzac Billy is correct in his prediction. So average high for this time of year is 0, average low -12. 17 was our high back in 2005. And in 1947, it was a chilly -37. That was the coldest on record. 8:02 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 5:29 p.m., giving us 9 hours and 27 minutes of daylight. Okay, so there's a wind warning in effect this evening in Victoria, looking at 90K winds, but down to 60K tomorrow. 70% chance of showers there as well. 9 degrees the high. 8 degrees the high in Vancouver with periods of rain. Edmonton could see some flurries and a risk of freezing rain as well. 4 degrees the high there. Also 4 in Calgary. Not so much rain though, as sunshine and a little bit of wind as well. As we look to the rest of the prairies, that extreme cold has mostly moved out east. Now we're looking at decent weather for the prairies. -1 in Saskatoon with periods of snow. -2 in Regina with light snow as well. And -8 the high in Winnipeg. Also looking at periods of light snow there. Okay, so extreme cold in effect for central Canada, including all these 3 cities here, and it's to last until Saturday. Toronto looking at -3 with some flurries. Ottawa also looking at a snow squall watch. -14 the high there, looking at periods of flurries as well. And -17 the high in Montreal. Could see a mainly sunny day there, but just extreme cold. Same thing for the East Coast here, extreme cold. We're talking wind chill close to -47 in the morning in Fredericton, but a high of -17. We're talking risk of frostbite within minutes for most of these cities. -15 the high in Halifax. Charlottetown looking at a -16 as a high and -11 the high in St. John's. St. John's not only looking at the extreme cold, also a snow squall watch and a wind warning in effect. They could see up to 100 km/h winds and 2 to 4 centimeters of flurries with local snow squalls. So there's a lot going on there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet, while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland hosted a meeting in Toronto today with their provincial and territorial counterparts. The meeting came at a time with inflation still running hot and interest rates being much higher than a year ago. The Bank of Canada raised its key lending rate again last week, bringing it to 4.5%, but says it's taking a pause to let the impact of the aggressive hiking cycle sink in. The economy is showing signs of slowing, but inflation was still at 6.3% in December. Meanwhile, the labor market remains strong, with December's unemployment rate nearing a record low of 5%. Apple posted its first quarterly revenue drop in nearly 4 years. The company said it suffered from pandemic-driven restrictions on its factories in China that curtailed sales of the latest iPhone during the Christmas season. The company's sales of $117 billion US for the October to December period represented a 5% decline from a year ago. Apple's profit also tumbled by 13% from the previous year. The City of Medicine Hat has an ambitious plan to grow its population to 110,000 people over the next 2 decades. The city's Mayor Lindsay Clark says part of the plan involves attracting more young professionals to the gas city. She says she has an idea of how that can be achieved.
And one of the things that we think we need to do as part of our purposeful growth strategy, but also to attract and retain youth in the city, is to provide the types of jobs that they're looking for, the jobs of the new economy, jobs that are high quality jobs, but that fit within the ambitions of younger people. And so if we can do that, we stand a stronger chance to retain the young people that already live here and attract new young people as well.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Medicine Hat Mayor Lindsay Clark and BCN's Jeanette Rocher coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 17 points on the day to finish at 20,758. The Dow was down 127 points to 33,926. The S&P 500 was down 43 on the day to 4136, and the Nasdaq was down 193 points to 12,006. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 269 on the day to 73.19 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 7 cents to 239 US. Gold was down 47.75 to 1864.97 US an ounce, and silver was down $1.11 to 22.35 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.92 per bushel, barley's at $9.14, canola's at $18.32, and corn is at $11.25 per bushel. Live cattle were up 53 cents to 160.28. Feeder cattle March contract was up 18 cents to 186.10, and lean hogs were down 33 cents to 75.03. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 74.65 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the case involving 2 parents accused of abusing their 6-week-old baby girl was back in Lethbridge Court this morning. Neither of the accused made an appearance, and both matters were adjourned to February 10th and 24th. The father faces charges of sexual assault and failing to provide the necessaries of life, while the mother is being charged with failing to provide the necessaries of life. The cost of war in Ukraine has really taken its toll, not just on the thousands of lives lost, but also on the financial hit a number of countries have taken, including Canada. Coming up, peace activist and blogger Yves Engler will explain how much our country has given Ukraine in its fight with Russia. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. The Family Center downtown Lethbridge is providing a weekly opportunity for dads, uncles, and grandfathers to play and connect with their children. Me and My Dad takes place on Saturdays from 10 to 11:30 a.m., featuring fun, brain-building activities for male caregivers to play with their kids. This program is free and open to children under 12. For more information and to register, visit famcenter.ca. On Saturday, February 25th, Streets Alive Mission is hosting their Coldest Night of the Year fundraiser. This family-friendly walk is to raise money to help those who are experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness. To register, donate, and to find out more information about this event and Streets Alive Mission, visit cnoy.org/Lethbridge. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Well, 2023 has begun with no shortage of controversy and military conflicts around the world. As we look at news sources and online sites, we may see a lot of information supporting one side or the other of a narrative. But there are those seeking peaceful resolutions, including Canadian peace activist, writer, and blogger Yves Engler, who joins me today from Montreal to talk about what in the world is going on and where does Canada fit into it all. Yves, welcome back to Bridge City News. Great to have you on again.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so Yves, looking over the articles on your website, yvesengler.com, it seems like there are wars and rumors of wars breaking out all across the world. And for the past year, everyone's been so focused on Ukraine. So do you think that the military operation in Ukraine is serving as a distraction to keep focus and attention away from the other wars and conflicts?
Well, I think there are people in the American military, which the Canadian military increasingly echoes, who see what's going on in Ukraine as a proxy war with Russia, and they see it as successful in the sense that Ukrainians are doing most of the dying, but Russia has been weakened, and they see that as a possible model for a conflict with China, specifically over Taiwan. And you have leading American four-star general a couple of days ago saying expects there to be a war with China by 2025. You have another about 2 weeks ago, a top American military official saying that directly contrasting what they did in Ukraine with regards to pre-positioning weapons and tactical intelligence support for the Ukrainian military, and equating that with Taiwan and the work the U.S. is doing in terms of building up a military presence, weaponry, etc., not only in Taiwan but also with regards to Japan, Philippines, to prepare for a war with China. So, yeah, I mean, I think that obviously what's going on in Ukraine is the worst of the conflicts, wars going on in the world today. In recent years, what's happened in Yemen has also been equally or similarly kind of violent and destructive, though receives a whole lot less attention. But the war in Ukraine, or what really should be understood at this point as a NATO-Russia proxy war, does still have the chance of escalating to something incredibly scary, because we do have the two main nuclear armed powers in the world that are ever so close to being directly at war with each other, and that obviously is something that no one in the world should even want to contemplate.
No, absolutely not. In your mind, who's benefiting from all these conflicts? I mean, overall, it's obviously the everyday people who lose out in wars, but who's benefiting here?
Well, the obvious beneficiaries are the arms manufacturers. There's no doubt about that. There's a contract, the Rochetel, Canada's contract, $90 million contract that was recently given. Looks like it was with no bid that the federal government, the Trudeau government, gave to this light armored vehicle manufacturer in Ontario to provide 200 vehicles to the Ukrainian military. Obviously, that's good for the shareholders of that company. The New York Times just reported on a Ontario company that received a $391 million US contract to provide shells, the bodies of shells for the Pentagon to produce, because there's just so much artillery being used on both sides, the Russians and the Ukrainian side. So obviously, a company like Bombardier, Montreal-based aerospace company, announced that it was really increasing its involvement in arms production tied to the war in Ukraine. So arms companies are the clear beneficiaries. Militaries often like, as hard as it may be to believe, but there are people who do like wars from the standpoint of just individuals who find themselves, who like the sort of danger and stuff like that. But clearly the main victims of all this are everyday Ukrainians, and more specifically, people who live in the eastern part of the country. People in the west of Ukraine have been relatively unsafe. People who live in the east of the country have just been horrible. But this has actually been going on for about 8 years in the east of Ukraine. There's been fighting going on in the Donbass for 8 years. So this is escalation from the standpoint of resources. Canada has now spent about $5 billion in assistance to the Ukraine, both military assistance, toward about $1.5 billion in military assistance, and $3 billion or so in different kind of financial assistance to the Ukrainian government, which would have collapsed financially without the outside support. So that is starting to cost the Canadian taxpayer a certain amount of resources, and the U.S. is even it's about $100 billion contribution from the U.S. So there are real costs, but there are also the oil companies have done well by the price of oil going up. There's it's contradictory dynamics that play out, and there's also, of course, people in some of the most impoverished parts of the world. The price of foodstuffs going up because of the war has been incredibly damaging in parts of Africa and parts of the Middle East. But yeah, I think that it's clear that everyday Canadians, everyday Americans, certainly not Ukrainians, are not doing well by this. But there are people who see the world from a military lens, who see the world as a great power competition between China with Russia, with China, and worry about sort of American-led domination of the world. They see this conflict as actually serving their purposes, while there are so many individuals who are harmed by it.
Mm-hmm. What about the leaders and the politicians of these Western countries? Are they benefiting in any way, and what is the benefit?
Well, I think that there was a certain amount of kind of rallying behind the Liberal government back in February when Russia instigated the large-scale invasion. The Liberals, there was obviously a lot of controversy around the protests in Ottawa at that point, and the Liberals sort of benefited from the NDP and the Conservatives sort of rallying behind let's help out Ukraine kind of thinking, and so kind of war type thinking, war type, I guess, hysteria, if you want to call it that, often is beneficial to leaders who find that media criticism lessens, and there's a certain amount of kind of support that plays out. But I think some of that's a little bit fleeting. Obviously, from Zelensky's standpoint, that's been beneficial to Zelensky. There's, all the opposition press in the Ukraine has been basically shut down, and there's the very kind of raucous usual Ukrainian politics have led to less of that. And probably the same thing with regards to Vladimir Putin. Putin has had a certain amount of kind of nationalism that's played out within Russia. But yeah, I'd say politicians certainly haven't done bad by the war.
Okay, Eve, and of course, speaking of politicians, you are a voice for peace here in Canada, and you certainly can ruffle some feathers. So can you maybe talk about your most recent incident with the Canadian ambassador to the UN, Bob Rae, and the event that Chrystia Freeland was speaking at?
Yeah, myself, Dimitri Lascaris, and Tamara Lawrence, two other anti-war activists in Ottawa, at the University of Ottawa, a week ago, we interrupted Canada's ambassador to UN, Bob Rae, during a speech he was given. And my intervention was focused on the fact that he was deceiving Canadians about his support for international law, specifically in the context of the war in Ukraine. He correctly notes that Russia's invasion is contrary to international law, clear act of aggression, and of course is very brutal, which I agree with Mr. Ray on. But where I don't agree with Mr. Ray is that he actually respects international law, because in recent weeks, the Canadian UN mission has voted against multiple resolutions upholding international law with regards to the Palestinians. And I pointed that out to Ray, and I pointed out that he also voted against a resolution criticizing neo-Nazism. He voted against a resolution supporting the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And so he's voted against all kinds of resolutions that I think are, progressive, internationalist-minded resolutions that he, in his own rhetoric, he claims to be upholding, but yet he, as Canada's representative to the UN, is actually voting against. And then I discussed his role in Haiti, and Bob Ray has taken, over the last 3 or 4 months, has taken a leading role in pushing for a foreign military intervention in Haiti. And he takes this role as if he's a sort of almost like a colonial governor, where he has, told the CBC that Haiti should, recreate its military. He has intervened and given his opinion in what should happen in Haiti in a whole bunch of different fronts, and that's completely contrary to, respecting sovereignty, and it's just an extension of at least 2 decades of Canadian government intervention in Haiti, which began, of course, with ousting of the elected president in 2004. The US, France, and Canada sent troops to oust the elected president, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, as well as thousands of other elected officials. And since that time, that brought in a UN occupation that lasted for 13 years. That UN occupation, we supported a coup government for 2 years. It killed thousands of people. Then the UN occupation would ultimately bring cholera into the country, because the UN forces were dumping their waste, specifically their feces, where people were drinking from water stream, and that's what brought cholera to Haiti. That led to tens of thousands of people died from cholera. More than 1 million people became ill with cholera. And even after this happened, UN troops, UN bases continued to dump their waste in water streams that people bathed and drank from. It was just an incredible disregard for Haitian life. And it was kind of reflective of the whole point of the UN force being there, which was to take over from the US, Canadian, and French troops that ousted the elected government, that backed a coup government, and really didn't have the interests of Haitians at heart. And so Bob Ray's, over the past 4 or 5 months, has really taken the lead in shaping Canadian policy on Haiti. And that's a policy of, 18 months ago, the core group, which is led by the US and Canada, representative of foreign ambassadors in Haiti, they appointed the current leader of Haiti, Ariel Henry, was appointed by the core group. And he has overseen further descent of Haitian affairs. And he had absolutely no electoral legitimacy. He wasn't elected. He's not constitutional, has very limited popular support. And we're backing Ariel Henry, and Bob Ray is a major player in the Trudeau government in shaping that policy. So I challenged him on that, and I think that so when you look at what Bob Ray says about the bad things that Russia's doing in Ukraine, he's correct. But the reality is Bob Ray supported the bombing of Libya. He supported the war in Afghanistan. He's, voted against all these UN resolutions upholding international law. So he's not somebody that we should take too seriously when he makes high-minded moral condemnations of Russia's actions.
Thanks so much. We have to let you go here. We're running out of time, but thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. That was Yves Engler, Canadian peace activist, writer, and blogger at yvesengler.com. Locals in Medicine Hat recently had the opportunity to attend the State of the City address and the ambitious plans for the next 20 years to support the growth of the gas city. There is a movement afoot to help grow the city by its mayor, Lindsay Clark, and her council. Mayor Clark joins us now from the Gas City. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Lindsay. Wonderful to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so as of the 2021 census, the city of Medicine Hat had a population of 63,271. I'm sure it's grown a little bit since then. That was a couple of years ago. So the city now has a goal to grow that number to 110,000 people in 20 years. So this sounds it does sound a little ambitious. It's a growth of more than 40,000 people. So how does the city plan to reach this goal?
Well, that's the tricky part, isn't it? The plan itself will be built out over time, but what it will require is strategic and targeted industry attraction, retention, and expansion that creates high-paying, high-skilled jobs. And then, of course, doing the same, retaining existing for workers, retaining existing talent in our community and attracting highly skilled individuals to our community. So that could be through immigration, the creation of high quality employment opportunities. And certainly we know that we need to make a welcoming community or continue to have a welcoming community because people want to feel like they belong where they live. So you can attract workers here, but if they don't want to stay, that's not going to grow your population. So that's one of the features of the plan for purposeful growth.
Okay, well, city councils are an extension of the provincial government according to municipal governance. So, Mayor Clark, are you able to describe how the provincial and federal governments can help to accomplish your plans for the city?
Yes, so we recently applied for and were successful in retaining were approved for the rural renewal stream to support attraction and retention of newcomers in rural Alberta through a community-driven approach. And we've also partnered with a few other municipalities in our community in this endeavor. So Cypress County, County of 40 Mile, Town of Redcliffe, and Town of Bow Island. And that will empower our community to recruit and retain foreign nationals to live and work and settle here. And so that was an initiative that was jointly between the federal government and provincial government. And we were lucky enough to get that opportunity here.
Okay, now I'm curious, Premier Danielle Smith recently won a seat in the Brooks Medicine Hat riding. So has it been beneficial having her there?
Well, she hasn't been in that seat for a very long time. And as you know, a premier's life is very busy.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Certainly, we've had opportunities to meet with her and hear about her vision for our community and our region. And I think her voice in the legislature is a powerful one. And we anticipate that she's doing her best to bring the needs of our region to the forefront.
Mm-hmm. How often do you and the Premier get to chat?
We've only chatted a couple of times. I know that, or a few, I guess would be more correct. I know that she regularly meets with others in our community as well. And what we have noticed is greater interaction with ministries. And we are working on developing a government relations strategy. I think over time, we've had the benefit of being a relatively wealthy city and had the luxury of not necessarily having to engage as much with the federal and provincial governments. But now we realize that we can't do anything alone. So we think it's time for us to start building those relationships, and that has started.
That's great. Now, do you have any ideas on how the towns and cities within Alberta could benefit from oil and gas royalties, given the size of budget windfalls?
I am not sure what the provincial government plans to do with those the surprise money in the budget, or the budget surplus. So we can wait and see. I know that there has been an effort to provide some assistance to residents in relation to the inflationary prices that are ongoing, and some of the higher electricity prices and the higher gas prices.
Well, we started out by talking about the growth in Medicine Hat and your hopes for that. Can you describe maybe the important role of small and medium-sized businesses in growing the size of Medicine Hat?
Yeah, so small businesses make up the vast majority of businesses in Alberta. And I think it's something like 87% of all businesses in 2021 had fewer than 5 employees. So if you increase those businesses by even 1 or 2 employees, you're making a huge impact. So really, that's when you're talking about 87% of the businesses, that's a real driver for our economy, any economy. And you by making facilitating growth in those areas, you can make a large impact with a little impact. So a small amount of jobs results in a lot of jobs in the aggregate.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe talk about the partnerships that currently exist to help establish and grow small and medium-sized businesses in Medicine Hat.
Yeah, sure. So we recently applied for a regional economic development grant from the province. And this project is a collaboration with a number of other municipalities. So we're a part of it: Cypress County, County of 40 Mile, Town of Bow Island, Town of Redcliffe, and the Village of 40 Mile. And that's basically the municipalities in the Canada's Census Division number 1. And so we're looking forward to working, if we are successful in getting the grant, to working together to develop a regional economic development strategy. But in addition to just the municipalities, we have a number of exceptional economic development organizations in our community that we'll be relying on as well. So we're looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts and working on a mechanism where we can communicate and be successful in deploying a regional economic development strategy, so that, like so many other plans, it doesn't end up just collecting dust on the shelf.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Our news director, Hal Roberts, had mentioned that when he worked at Chat TV around 18 years ago, he noticed that the city had a lot of seniors, and there was a push then to draw more younger people to the city. Is that still the case now? I'm not as familiar with Medicine Hat as he is. So is that still the case?
Absolutely. Yeah. That is a key and necessary driver for this council. And one of the things that we think we need to do as part of our purposeful growth strategy, but also to attract and retain youth in the city, is to provide the types of jobs that they're looking for, the jobs of the new economy, jobs that are high quality jobs, but that fit within the ambitions of younger people. And so if we can do that, we stand a stronger chance to retain the young people that already live here and attract new young people as well. We have a college, Medicine Hat College, which provides also an opportunity for people who might not live here, might not have grown up here, to come and check out Medicine Hat while they go to school. And if we can provide a welcoming enough community with lots of fun things to do, then we stand a better chance of having some of those students stay in Medicine Hat because they feel like they belong here.
Mm-hmm. Now, Medicine Hat was accepted into the Alberta government's Rural Renewal Stream program. So what does that mean for the city?
Yeah, so I touched on this before. It is a collaborative project, and it really will just help us to attract foreign nationals into our community, to help fill some of our jobs that are difficult to fill, provide an opportunity for both business and community to benefit from having additional immigration into our region.
Okay, interesting. I know the city does have a number of initiatives. Maybe you can talk about a couple of them. I know you have the yellow sandboxes. Maybe explain what that's all about.
Well, there's a lot of ice here. I don't know how much ice you guys have, but
plenty.
So we provided, it's very expensive to clear off all the ice on all the streets. Like per snowfall, to do all of it is $1.5 million, I think. We recognize the need to have safe streets and that there was a real concern about the iciness around. So we provided some sand that's free for use for residents in our city to sprinkle as required.
Sprinkle as required. I like that. Maybe talk a little bit about the fair entry program.
Yeah, our fair entry program has existed before this council, and it's for a program to help low-income families and individuals afford popular city programs. So we did recently make a change in the last December. Council approved a motion to amend the program to add transit. And we also increased the subsidy rate for eligible services from 50 to 75%. And we also increased the maximum user fee assistance available per resident for recreation and Esplanade, which is our theater education programs.
Okay. Maybe talk about if you have plans on how you see the city and local organizations working together to accomplish future goals for the HAT. I think about maybe something like the Chamber of Commerce or Apex, for example.
Yeah, so we are going to be engaging with a number of different community groups over the next year through town halls, just to make sure that there's another avenue, and it's more of an in-person conversational avenue for individuals in our community to provide their feedback to the city, ask questions. Sometimes people feel upset because they don't necessarily understand why something's happening. So that provides us an opportunity to give maybe more of an extended explanation. And we're also going to be looking into providing some resources that individuals in our community who want to start community associations, such as neighborhood associations, a group that is really interested in mountain biking, and then how they interface with the city as well. Certainly the Chamber of Commerce, Apex, EntreCorp, Verge Economic Development, Medicine Hat College, Medicine Hat Real Estate Board, Build, and I'm probably missing some here, but these organizations do help us to find solutions because they're on the ground, and that's really what one of the things this council wants to do is get closest to the problem and allow solutions to bubble up from the grassroots where the issue is really people are experiencing the issue because they're in the best possible situation to determine what a solution might be.
So true. Really quickly, let's move on to transportation for a minute here. I know here in Lethbridge, we've been trying to expand our airport. Is there talk of extending the main runway at the Medicine Hat Airport? Is that still a part of the plans to grow the city?
Yep, that's something that's still under discussion, and I know that this current provincial government has expressed some interest in developing out municipal airports and recognizes them as an important part of growing an economy. I'm not sure that we have I can't say a specific plan or dates at the moment, but certainly work is being done to determine what that might look like.
Okay, and how about Highway 3? How important is it to twin Highway 3? How important is that to the growth and economy of Medicine Hat?
Well, it's such an important corridor, transportation corridor, and it really has a lot of benefits in terms of the traffic between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat and all the towns in between and beyond, even to the east. So we are looking forward to the provincial government living up to their commitment to expand that highway and twin that over the next few years.
We are just about out of time here, Mayor Clark, but is there anything else you wanted to add?
So we were accepted into the Community Action Lab, the Strong Towns Community Action Lab. We're the only city in Canada that was accepted into this pilot program. And on February 7th, which is coming up soon, at the Esplanade Arts and Heritage Center at 7 p.m., there will be a public session where everyone can come and learn about what the Community Action Lab is and how we are going to implement it here. And we are very fortunate to have the president of Strong Towns, Charles Marin, will be there in attendance. And so we're really looking forward to that.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. Looks like we're out of time here, but Medicine Hat Mayor Lindsay Clark, we appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for chatting with us from the Gas City.
Thank you.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.